Reserve now to experience Chihuly and savor summer at Biltmore.
Who up blooming their burrow right now? Who up blooming their burrow right now, man? That's what I need to know. We got 30 seconds till the Bloomburrow reveal stream. Welcome everybody. If you're new here, how you doing? All right, let's go, guys. We're in it now. Yeah. Yeah, Cookies is in it. Look at this, Cookies. We got adorable forest animals. Love the animation on this.
Welcome to Valley, a world filled to the brim with creatures, big and small, all working together as they share in the prosperity and safety of their communities. The largest settlement in Valley is Three Tree City, a massive dwelling at the conjunction of the forests and the Long River, built across 3 ancient intertwined trees. It's home to a variety of animal folk, and designed to accommodate their different sizes and shapes, whether these creatures are most comfortable in water, or land, or in the sky. Three Tree City has a place for them to call home. The upper branches of Three Tree City are filled with a dazzling array of bird folk, capable of great deeds of chivalry and selflessness. The bird folk are known for their inability to ignore injustice. Perhaps nothing demonstrates the character of the bird folk quite like the Plume Creed, a risky venture to the tip of the world, a mighty peak that no one but a brave bird folk can reach.
Bird tribal incoming.
You can recognize a bird folk who has completed the Plume Creed by the single feather they wear atop their head. Included in this set are several booster fun treatments to collect, one being the borderless raised foil anime cards. Dazzling raised gold foiling and exciting anime art make these cards the apex of collectability. Find English versions globally in collector boosters, and Japanese versions exclusively in Japanese collector boosters. The charming new Showcase Woodland Frame treatment reads Kindred faction cards in frames of foliage, evoking a sense of pastoral beauty and natural elegance. They encapsulate the cozy energy of Bloomburrow and allow players to showcase their fondness for these kindred animals and express their own unique personalities. The closest natural allies of the bird folk are the mouse folk, plucky, loyal seekers of adventure and glory. Mouse folk have large interconnected families. There are few problems mouse folk can't overcome together. All the animal folk of Valley cherish their young, and springtime is particularly rich with new life. The new mechanic, Offspring, enables you to create 1/1 creature tokens that represent the young version of an animal species. The offspring of your animal folk will have the same abilities as the parent creature. The only difference is their 1/1 power and toughness. They are still children after all. These young creatures of Valley show promise and are eager to take on the adventures that lie ahead. Rabbit folk are also community-focused, as well as being talented chefs and farmers who provide food to most of the creatures in Valley. They're conflict-averse as a rule, preferring to let trouble blow over them rather than stick their noses in it. That doesn't mean that they can't defend themselves, though. Phineas is one such guardian of the animal folk in Valley. This adeptly trained archer stands ready to protect his home from afar, as well as his companions as they venture
this is
through
insanely
Valley.
twee.
Gathering
with
together
anime art,
is a
I mean.
surefire path to strength. Bloomburrow encourages your creatures to band together so they can gain extra benefits. These kindred animal folk must share with
Holy
each
shit,
other
that's a banger card.
in order to survive. The new mechanic, Gift, allows you to gift your opponent a benefit to reap more value out of a spell or artifact. The gift varies depending on the card. It might be food tokens, an extra card, a 1/1 fish, or something else.
Okay, so that's offspring and that's gift.
The strength of their kindred bonds, and the willingness to share, the animal folk of Valley can survive almost anything.
Who are the bad guys? This is
There
what I
are
need to
those
know.
in Valley that prefer moonlight to sunlight. Bat folk are deeply protective
Okay,
of their
here we go.
community, occasionally superstitious, and focused on maintaining the balance between all things: light and darkness, life and death, and of course, day and night. Nocturnal creatures, they use the moon and stars to determine their choices and fuel their magic. As a result of being awake when others are asleep, they serve as silent guardians of the vulnerable creatures of Valley.
Ooh, good card.
Raccoon folk are free-spirited wanderers, collectors, and entertainers. Moira, Trash Tactician, wields new mechanic, Expend, rewarding you for spending 4 or more mana in a single turn. This fearsome raccoon also likes to work closely with fellow raccoon folk, adding red or green mana for each raccoon you control.
Raccoon tribal incoming.
Rather than settling down in Three Tree City or elsewhere, raccoons
Trash
spend
Panda
their lives on the
Tribal.
move, acquiring a hoard of objects along the way. Some may call it trash, but to a raccoon, every broken teapot and piece of wagon wheel is a treasure. There are even more creatures who thrive in odd and adverse circumstances in Three Tree City. The lizard folk are a culture of expressive artists. They value creation and destruction in equal measure. Lizards also have a spiritual attachment to fire. As cold-blooded creatures, they rely on the heat from flame when sunbathing is not an option. Lizard communities can often be found bundled together around a fire or furnace, sharing this sacred connection.
Don't forget to tenderly like the video, guys. You gotta like the stream. It helps me out a
The
lot.
squirrel folk are morbid stewards of land and the life-death cycle. Though they focus mostly on burying the remains of the dead, a
Oof.
select few squirrel folk are able to bring bones back from the grave for their own purposes. The squirrel folk have also become expert at maintaining themselves through caches of food, collected through the art of foraging. The new mechanic, Forage, is a squirrel-themed mechanic that allows you to exile 3 cards from your graveyard or sacrifice a food token to gain an effect. Rat folk are isolationist keepers of secrets and ancient relics. They have survived harsh circumstances by forming psychic connections with native insects. With their insect companion by their side, rat folk can be quite formidable in a pinch. Down by the waterways of Three Tree City, entirely different groups make their home. The otter folk are playful and fun-loving, with a strong daredevil streak. They seek thrills by storm chasing, the practice of following menacing creatures called calamity beasts as closely as possible, until the danger becomes
no,
too
look
great
at that anime
even
art
for
otter.
these adventurous critters. The frog folk are curious and intelligent. They possess a unique culture of augury, which allows them a limited understanding of the future. While their foresight makes them an instrumental part
Cookie's
of
dying
life in
over
Valley,
here.
it also results in many frogs being fatalistic.
Good point. The warlocks
Hard to
are
smile when you can
outlaws.
always see
Yep.
the waiting doom. Sometimes the frog folk,
Boo,
acting on their own
Simic.
foresight, can bring doom upon themselves. The wizard Glab, for instance, has recently stolen an egg from the great night owl, inviting retaliatory wrath from the powerfully winged creature of darkness. This legendary elemental
I
bird
love this card.
carries night on its wings that blackens the sky. Maha is just one of the many dangers across
its
Valley.
feathers night.
These animal folk must coexist with calamity beasts,
Eater as all.
mighty creatures which blur the line between flesh and blood animals and elemental forces of nature. And for naturalists, the borderless field notes
Ward sacrifice of
the raw
food.
power
Holy
of
crap,
calamity
that is
beasts,
not easy to kill.
rendered in the wild by a loving hand. But the people of Three Tree City are not helpless. The great hero Mabel forms a party of adventurers to protect Valley against the calamity beasts, aided by the now transformed Ral Zarek, who is more than happy to lend a paw. Since there are no humans to be found on Bloomburrow, Ral has magically transformed into an otter upon arriving on this plane.
Anime
How
Ral.
interesting. But even without help from allies outside of Valley, the animal
Yeah, this is like
capable of
60s,
using
70s
magic
Disney.
to
This
defend
is
themselves. A
classic.
cycle of modal spells allows you to select from a list of 3 abilities.
Almost watercolor
In this
hand
set,
pacing.
They're each valued at 1, 2, or 3 paws. Choose up to
Oh,
5
no
paws
way we
worth
have the
to
paw
gain those
mechanic.
effects. You may
Luna
even
Yeen,
choose
we have the
same mode
paw
more than
mechanic.
once. The card type class is returning with a focus on bakers,
Yes,
blacksmiths,
claw type,
artists,
class
and
type.
other
Not class,
villages.
listen to me, claw
Pay the
type.
mana cost at
Class
each
type
level
is sick.
to gain its ability, working
Love
your way
that.
down to all 3.
Height for
Life
class.
goes on in Valley. The turning of the seasons, the tilling of the earth, and the occasional upheaval are all aspects of the everyday to these brave critters. It is not the mighty warriors that make Three Tree City what it is, but the little folk who carry on day after day. There are also heroes and commanders
I like
in
that we're
Valley
getting probably
who are
night
truly
control.
adept at
I mean night
inspiring the
support.
animals around them. Led by Bello, Bard of the Brambles, the animated army deck lets you ramp into impressive calamity beasts, cast expensive permanents to synergize with the main set's expend mechanic. With Commander Zinnia, Valley's voice, the Family Matters deck specializes in doubling up on enters the battlefield effects by granting your creatures offspring. Fill the board with 1/1 token versions of your creatures. Hazel of the Root Bloom leads the Squirreled Away
I
deck.
can mess with this commander deck.
Outvalue your foes with a combination of squirrel and food tokens. This deck includes some traditional kindred effects for squirrel fans. With the Peace Offering deck, Miss Bumbleflower hands out
Oh
cards
my
using
goodness.
the gift mechanic. This deck evokes a group hug
Not
style
Miss
of play that's
Bumbleflower.
friendly, until it isn't. In addition to the main set's Imagine Courageous Critters cards, Tameo is one of 4 that can be found in the Commander
Tameo's a
decks.
rabbit.
Because Bloomburrow has its own unique aesthetic, planeswalkers and creatures who happen to end up here, like Ral, are transformed into denizens of Valley. With the Imagine Courageous Critters
Tameo
treatment,
rabbit
your
confirmed.
favorite planeswalkers and creatures have been utterly transformed by the adorable lens of Bloomburrow, which brings out their inner animal folk. See powerful creatures and favorite planeswalkers.
Walker
as squirrels,
personas, yep,
birds,
they did it.
bats, otters,
The son of
and
a bitches
more.
did it.
Like this sly planeswalker, if he were to appear here in the land of animal folk. And characters aren't the only ones to get a reimagining. Powerful weapons also take on new forms in the Bloomburrow setting. The Sword of Fire and Ice looks a little different when wielded by an otter. If you'd like to visit Three Tree City and all the creatures of Valley, you'll have your chance soon. You can play early at your local game store for pre-release starting the weekend of July the 26th, and on MTG Arena on July the 30th. Otherwise, we'll see you on August the 2nd when Bloomburrow will be available everywhere. Keep an eye out for the Buy a Box promo and bundle promo cards. Learn more about the adventures of Mabel and her party with story episodes now online at magic.wizards.com. Until then, we hope you'll come visit us soon in our peaceful valley under the trees.
All right, guys. That was the reveal. They're gonna do a weekly MTG, and they're gonna talk more about what is actually being released here. That was just kind of the premiere one, so if you want to hang... Oh, here we go.
Hello and welcome to the weekly MTG after show for Bloomburrow. Hopefully you've just seen a ton of cool stuff from the upcoming set. We're going to spend the next hour diving into a lot of what you've just seen, including mechanics, the archetypes, Calamity Beast. We're going to see some promos. We're, of course, going to look at...
Probably a wolf.
But we're going to dive deep into all of that and talk with some of the minds behind this adorable set. We have with us today in the studio...
I'd love
Ian
to see
Duke
more bats,
and
yeah.
Oliver, too, who are... Well, I'll just let you introduce yourselves. What was your part in the set?
Hey everyone, I'm Ian Duke. I was the set design lead for Bloomburrow, which means I was responsible from taking the vision handoff all the way through iterating on the card set itself, sculpting the limited format, and seeing the set through playtesting process.
All right, Oliver.
I'm Oliver. I'm a game designer, part of the play design team. I worked a lot on Bloomburrow during its set design process and worked a lot on the limited and standard applications of the set.
Great. So, yeah, these are two of the best people to walk us through this set. So we're going to start going through a bunch of mechanics and preview cards and all of that sort of stuff. If you have questions, go ahead and put them in chat. I'm not going to guarantee we get to them because we've got a lot to get through today. It always helps me if you tag @Magic, and I'll keep an eye out for them and ask what I can. But we're going to launch right into it with one of the coolest new mechanics, Ian. I say coolest, but it's adorable, which is Offspring. And our first preview card, which is pretty powerful here, Warren Warleader. Which is a 4/4 Rabbit Knight with that Offspring ability, and whenever you attack, you either get to make a rabbit or give
Create. Okay, so
+1/+1. So tell us.
It's a
about
rabbit.
the Offspring ability.
Yeah, Offspring is sort of a kicker-like mechanic that appears on creatures, where if you spend a little bit of extra mana,
we
you
saw
get an additional
the
copy of that creature. except the
Hula,
copy
who's
is a little bit
Mara,
one-one.
whose wings are
And what's
night,
super cool
which
about
is
this
a
mechanic,
very
sort of
powerful
mechanically
black
and
owl.
gameplay-wise, is that the creatures often self-synergize, meaning if you have the multiple
Adeline.
copies of
This
them
is
from using the
Rabbit
Offspring
Adeline.
mechanic, they kind of combo together in some way. So the Warren Warleader is a great example of this, where with its its ability here can either make tokens or give your team a boost, or you can kind of mix and match the two over the course of a couple turns.
Great. And I noticed something down there. This tokens mana cost.
So many furries
2
flying for this
white,
set.
and I
Luna,
saw
we have
question in
a
chat
paw
asking, do the
mechanic.
tokens
Come
also have
on.
a mana value?
What are we
They do.
doing?
They are copies of the creature, so they inherit the mana value that the base creature has.
Okay, and they're all adorable little 1/1s.
Yes.
Rabeline. It's quoted right here. First time
They all
anybody
have
said
their
Rabeline
individual
on my
tokens,
stream
and you can
cookies.
kinda collect those as you go.
And I think we've got another Offspring card here with its own adorable little token. Tender Wild Guide. Producer Sean was adamant about us getting this one in the show. It's a little possum, and it's adorable. It's got its little buddy there. Makes mana, can put +1/+1 counters on creatures. All right. Next, let's move on to another mechanic that's really nice. It's just, you're just giving people stuff, Oliver. So tell us about Gift and this first card, Kidnap.
Yeah, so Gift is also similar to Kicker, except instead of paying additional mana, you give your opponents, or in multiplayer, you get to choose an opponent.
Presale on Arena is already
Gift,
available.
And it's often a card,
updated.
a food, or a fish token.
The fish token one.
Possums confirmed. Yes, we have possums.
It feels very Bloomburrow.
Yeah, so depending on how powerful the reward is the gift that you're giving kind of is related to that. Card is generally like the most costly gift.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about Kidnap here.
Yeah, so Kidnap, it's either, if you don't give the gift, it's kind of a delayed mind control because you can't start attacking with the creature until 3 turns later. But if you do give the gift, you get a full mind control, but it's not card advantage in the same sense mind control generally is because you're giving your opponent a card. But you get a big tempo advantage, so it's still a very powerful play.
All right, we have another gift card here to show, which is a simpler version of the gift mechanic. Wear Down. Is this, what, Oliver, is sort of the balance we see between the different kinds of gifts in the set?
Yeah, so I'd say if you're getting like a full card and reward, generally you're giving a card. If you're getting a more minor reward, then
The
you'll get
bird
a
folk
fish or a
guards
token.
flitted angrily. Serious
So
Timbles
like Wear
again.
Down here, it's a naturalized effect, but you can destroy
Beaver
2
be
with
eating their
your
home.
card, like you said. Cool, makes sense. All right.
What a dick.
Now let's look at Expend. So we've got Wandertail Mentor here, So Ian, tell us a little bit about Expend.
Ooh,
Expend is
that's
a
a big
mechanic
ramp right
associated
there.
with the raccoon creature type, which appears in red and green. And what Expend says is when you spend your 4th mana on casting spells this turn, you get a little bonus. And you can sort of divide that up whichever way you choose. You could cast 1 big spell that costs 4 or more mana, or you could cast, say, 2
That's
spells
huge
that cost
for
2 mana
ramp.
each. And when
Gruul
you cast
Stompy
the
gonna
second one,
be
you'll get
brutal.
your Expend trigger. And it always appears on permanent cards, typically creatures like this, where you'll get the bonus after you cast spells when this is already on the battlefield.
And I see it specifically calls out Expend 4. Are there different mana costs with Expend in the
Yeah, I
set?
sort of glossed over that a little bit. There are a few cards that have different expend costs, but most of them are 4 at lower rarities. And then there's a couple more exciting ones at high rarities that have, I think, Expend 8 is one of the examples.
Well, I think we saw one of those more exciting ones in the debut.
It's like a more
Let's
evolved
look
Ruby.
at and wear a Trash Tactician. So this one, again, has that Expend 4, but it does have Expend 8 as well.
Yep, so you sort of get the basic or the moderate bonus if you spend 4 mana in a turn, but if you can spend all the way up to 8, you get that big exciting bonus as well.
Makes sense. Now, we haven't paused on this yet, on the treatments, but we showed a lot of the treatments in the debut video, Ian, and then we also have shown a couple here. So let's start talking about these. So this is the Borderless Raised Anime card. Where and how can people pick these up?
So these are available in collector boosters only, and they're all in the foil raised treatment. There are 20 cards in the set that have this treatment, and you can get them in collector boosters of any language. They'll usually be English language, but the Japanese collectors boosters have the Japanese language versions of them as well.
Cool. All right, and we'll talk more about treatments as we go along, but if you have questions about treatments, we will try to answer those, or you can put them in chat. I will pause and say I'm seeing a lot of questions in chat about bans. We're not going to talk about that today. We're here to focus on Bloomburrow, so we'll get to that. Don't worry. Another day, another time. Today we're talking about Bloomburrow. So let's go to the next mechanic, Oliver, which is Forage. So Forage, we've got Thorn Vault Forager here, appropriate name. It's a 2-mana 2/2, mana dork, but it has that Forage. Add 2 mana in any combination of colors.
Exile
It's
3 cards
also
from your
able to
graveyard
search
or
for
sacrifice
Squirrel,
a food.
which, is an ability we've all been waiting for a
So
long time.
you
But,
turn
Oliver, let's focus on
you
Forage.
turn
What is
graveyard
Forage?
into 2 mana.
Forage is the black-green squirrel mechanic. You basically, to enable it, you have to sacrifice
Oh, I
a
didn't
food
see
or
that.
exile 3 cards from your graveyard.
Mm-hmm.
So naturally, squirrels are going to be about acquiring food or putting cards in the graveyard. It's fun to combine these two things. Definitely a very black-green feeling ability.
Yep. And we saw a card in the debut as well. So I love Thornveld Forager, but let's bring up Osteomancer Adept here.
Okay, here we go. Squirrel
Oliver,
Warlock.
tell us a little bit about this card as well.
Yeah, so this is kind of like a Underworld's Breach for creatures, so it's less reputable than Underworld's Breach, but it still gives a lot of the same kind of big turns. And I'd say with this one, it's a lot about you want to acquire food to enable it a lot of the time, because naturally if you use cards from your graveyard, you'll have less creatures to bring back. But black, tends to be better at getting cards into the
I
graveyard.
love this
than
alternate, the
acquiring
showcase
food.
woodland
If
art.
you're playing like a non-squirrel deck, it's probably
It looks
gonna be
like
more
something
about
like
using
a
cards in your graveyard to
watercolor
enable
from a
it.
storybook.
Okay.
It's very nice.
The Showcase Woodland treatment, we've seen a little bit of that so far, Ian. So tell us the story behind that.
So the Showcase Woodland treatment is available in both collector and play boosters, and you can get foil or non-foil versions of the cards. There's 42 different cards in the set. 7 of them are mythics, and the rest are regular rares.
All right.
Exactly,
And
Watership down.
also of note on the different treatments, we will have a collecting Bloomburrow article going up at the conclusion of the show that will have all the details. So if you're in it for the nitty gritty, you'll definitely have that resource after the show. All right, now this next card is a returning mechanic, Oliver, actually we're going to Ian here, which we showed in the debut, which are the enchantment type class. So here we have
go.
Hunter's Talent. When it enters, target creature you control deals damage equal to its power, so it's a bite spell in that way. And then the second level is whenever you attack, target attacking creature gets +1/+0 in trample. And then at the beginning of your end step in level 3, if you control a bigger creature, you get to draw a card. So tell us a bit about classes, Ian.
Love
So
classes.
this is returning mechanic, as you said. We first saw it in AFR, Adventures in the Forgotten Realms, and there these were classes, sort of like D&D character classes. You know, you had Ranger and Paladin and Barbarian and things like that. Here we're going for more sort of like pastoral classes, like jobs that you would see in a village, like a fisherman or a hunter or something along those lines.
I hope they reprint a
What
couple
led
of
you to
them.
include classes in this set?
It's just a really flavorful way of sort of showing the way that the animals sort of get together and have their own societies and structures and different jobs.
Okay. All right. Next up, we're going to look at, this is one of the coolest cycles in the set, Oliver. It's a mythic set. There's 5 of these, only 5 of these. But these are the seasons. So let's take a look at Season of Loss. And
Here's the pause.
yeah, the card itself, very cool. You can make players sacrifice creatures, draw cards for creatures that die, and then make people lose life. But let's the
Shit.
thing is a really
Season of
cool
Loss.
animation. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so I like to think of these as like currency cards.
Damn.
To get 5 currency and then
Lose life for each creature in your graveyard.
depending on how
Against
powerful each
mill,
ability is,
against
it
Golgari
costs,
self-mill.
an
You put
according amount of currency. So naturally, like the 3 is going to be the most powerful, and that's the only
Loss.
one you
Oh,
can't
no.
choose multiple times. But there's these are kind of similar to commands from Brothers War. They're just like modal, big effect cards, but unlike commands, you have more customizable ability.
Yeah.
And it's important to note that these are all self-contained. So like as you're resolving this spell, you're spending all these points on the different modes. It's not like a mechanic like energy where you can sort of save this currency over and
Sure.
mix and match them, right?
Yeah, so you couldn't do the 2
With
twice,
Bloodletter, make
but
somebody
not
lose
use it and save it.
life
Also,
equal to the amount in your graveyard and then double it.
Yeah, okay.
Also on this one, the order matters. Like, if you choose like 3 1s and a 2, the sack will happen first, and then you draw cards accordingly afterwards.
Now we talk a lot about design knobs when we're talking about this. Seems to have a lot of knobs. How challenging were these to design?
These were really challenging, but we knew early on they were worth it. Just this sort of feeling of you get to mix and match.
Gain and
choose your
drain,
own
yeah,
combinations
very
and
good gain and
sort
drain
of, you know,
card.
these are many
The fact that
cards
you can
in one,
force
and
somebody
so
to sacrifice
you have
5
much
creatures
flexibility and
is
so many different ways you can
pretty
combine.
intense.
But we did put a lot of effort into making sure that the different modes made sense with each other and combined in interesting ways, so that each different combination of modes sort of produced a different series of effects.
You can spend as up to
Let's
5
look
paw
at
prints.
Another
Very
season
important.
as well. That'll put us up to I think 3 seasons for the day. Season of the Bold. So the same. They're all 5 paw prints, right? All the same kind of.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that is where we ended up. Yeah, we tried mixing different numbers, but 5 is what worked best.
Yeah.
All right. So the single paw print mode on this one is create a tapped treasure token. 2 is exile the top 2 cards of your library until the end of your next turn. You may play them, and 3 is until the end of your next turn. Whenever you cast a spell, Season of the Bold deals 2 damage to up to 1 target creature. So Oliver, tell us a little bit more about this card.
Yeah, so this card is a lot more delayed than the black one, but it enables some really big turns. If you just
that's what I
able
just
to
said,
spend your
Josh.
Turn 5 just taking off and setting
Stack
up.
it with bloodletters.
But with
Powerful.
the extra mana from treasures, extra cards, and the powerful board wipe ability, you could have some really big pop-off turns the following turn.
Now I notice that this creates tapped treasure tokens, which seems to be something you all are doing a little bit more often. Is that intentional shift?
Yeah, very much so. It's just a little bit safer in terms of like the explosivity of having a big combo turn and so forth. In this case, you're getting 5 treasure tokens if you spend all of your points on the first mode. So we didn't want you to be able to get like all of your mana back all at once and then continue casting a bunch more spells.
You didn't want it to be a ritual that,
Exactly. Yeah. It can be a ritual, but it's sort of at least delayed
delayed,
by 1
yeah.
turn, right? So you're setting up for your next turn.
Very cool. And there are 5 of these. They're all mythic.
Yep.
Yep. And they all get that really cool art treatment. Actually, let's go back to that real quick so that you can tell us about the borderless treatment.
Yeah, so these are example of the borderless treatment here. There are a few other cards that also have this. They're available in both foil and non-foil from both collector and playtesters.
Let's get to 25 likes, guys.
Yeah, the art.
And I'll give out 5
set really just
channel
we
memberships.
say this every set, but we hit a new level.
We got
again.
40-something people watching. Let's
The
get to
art is
25.
amazing and weird and pastoral.
We'll teach
and
y'all to like.
dark and
There
all
we
the
go.
kind of
There's a
I
shame
don't know.
like right there.
I'm really happy with it. And we're going to see more cool art coming up with, we're going to talk about the archetypes next.
Great.
So next up, we're going to go through all 10 of the archetypes. So Ian, why don't you first tell us kind of about the the structure of the set with the different.
Hey, there. Okay, now people
Yeah,
pouring
absolutely.
it on.
So first of all, the set has a really strong emphasis on creature types. And
There you go,
to
guys.
reflect that, each of the 2 color pairs in limited when you're drafting will be associated with a particular creature type. So for example, in white-blue, we have birds. In red-black,
Larry Mitchell became a channel member.
We'll go through all of them.
TK Tiger
But the
Tat
important thing to
Megalon.
know is if you're drafting and you just choose a bunch of creatures of the same creature type, they will have a mechanical identity and your deck will come together in a coherent way. Vice versa, if you pick a color pair and you're doing the mechanical thing there, you'll end up with a lot of creatures of the same type. So it kind of feels like it's in lockstep there in a very cool way.
Cool. All right, so let's start things off with bats.
Bats. Here we go.
This is the
Everybody
white
lock in.
black crew. Ian, tell us about what bats are up to.
So first off, all the bats have flying, so you'll see that as a common theme among them. And their sort of mechanical theme is caring about yourself gaining and losing life on your own turn. So you've got a lot of cards that are kind of in the space of a Johnny's Pride Mate, rewarding you for gaining life during your own turn.
Oh yeah, we gained a
But,
bunch. We went up to
because
33.
they're both white and black, they also reward you for paying life during your own turn. So if you have, for example, a black card draw spell that costs you some life and gives you some cards, that'll also often trigger some of your trigger abilities for your bats. So this card that we're showing here, the Moonrise Cleric, is just a very simpler enabler for that deck where it just attacks and gains you a life, and then it'll pop off all your triggers as a result.
Okay. Now, we've seen gaining life as an identity for white-black. We've seen losing life as an. How did you land on it being both for bats?
Just a really interesting way of combining both white and black. You know, bats often we think of like vampire bats as like sucking blood, right? So it's like, you know, dealing damage but also gaining life. So it felt both flavorful and also a really unique way of combining the different color pies of white and black together.
Yeah. I also want to go back to that comment. I noticed that we're using hybrid.
I think
mana
most of the
symbols
blacks are
here.
cleric.
Can you talk a little bit
From
about
what
that
I
more
understand,
in
the
the
bats
Yeah,
are
we
like
do have a
their
cycle of hybrid mana
religions or their
commons,
priests.
and they're meant to sort of be a little bit of a signpost in terms of teaching you what that archetype is about. But because they're hybrid mana, they can sort of blend into the other archetypes as well. And this is a simple enough one that, you know, any deck might want to use this. For example, like a white-blue deck that's about, you know, birds that also have flying, for example, might want to include this. Just it's a nice card to kind of erase your opponent, gain a little bit of life as you're attacking with an evasive creature.
All right. And we are going to show off all of the hybrid cycle of commons. All right. Let's move over to Oliver and talk about rats with Mind
Rats are
Drill
Dimir,
Assailant
which I rather
here.
like.
So Threshold, we saw in the debut is returning. Talk a little bit about that and how it works with the rats.
Yeah, so rats are all about thresholds. You just want to put cards in your graveyard. As you see, this one surveils to kind of enable itself. There's also like self-mill.
Surveil is back. Okay, we got real Dimir
Black
cards.
likes that kind of stuff. And I'd say the rats also have kind of like a ninja flair about them. They have a lot of like hard to block creatures. They're a lot about nickel and diming your opponents rather than just going for a big swing, although this card is certainly capable of that. As you see, it becomes a 5/5 when you have the thresholds.
Well, I think our next preview card talks a little bit more, or shows a little bit more about that nickel and diming here.
Yeah, so this creature helps enable your other thresholds and itself with the looting, and then eventually just starts getting you full card advantage, which is what the rats really want.
All right. Next, let's move on to one that is sure to be a fan favorite, Ian, which is Blue-Red Otters.
Otters.
This might be my favorite
otter time.
creature type in the set. They're adorable, but they're also spell slingers. So tell us about this otter wizard and the otters in general.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, otters were super popular throughout playtesting here. This is the Spellslinger deck that cares about casting instants and sorceries. So you'll see, for example, a lot of the otters have prowess or caring about instants and sorceries in some other way. And there's a couple different ways you can build this deck. You can either sort of be the classic tempo-oriented red-blue deck where you're playing some early creatures with prowess or that care about instants and sorceries, and then following them up by removing your opponent's creatures or putting them off balance with bounce spells or stun spells. So that's one way to do it. The other way to do it is more of a controlling blue-red deck that's focused more on card advantage with a lot of removal spells, and you're trying to prolong the game and then finish your opponent off later on.
Yeah.
Oh,
here's
God.
those prowess ones you're talking about.
Stormcatcher.
This seems
Instants
like
and
a
sorceries
powerful
cost
little
1
wizard
less
that
for 2
combines
mana.
A couple abilities
Lord
we've not seen in the
mercy.
same place before.
Yeah, absolutely. This is one that, you know, maybe even has some applications for constructed decks as well, just in terms of being able to pop off with a big flurry of spells in one turn and then hit your opponent for a bunch of damage.
God, otters are going to be so powerful, dude.
right.
Lunasm's going to lose it.
Next up, we're going to switch to black-red and some lizards with Cindering Cutthroat.
Assassin, that's an
A
outlaw
lizard
too.
Assassin, which is a heck of a creature type line.
That's an outlaw
Oliver,
too.
Tell us what the lizards are up to in this set.
Yeah, they're pretty aggro. They're like a bloodthirst type of archetype, so they're all about getting advantage after you dealt a bit of damage to your opponent. So really good with like pinging effects and small unblockable creatures to enable it.
Okay, it seems to me like some of these, we're getting a look at, we're going through the archetypes, and it seems to me like some of the archetypes are built to be a little bit more closely associated. So like we look at the black-white common, which it attacks, it makes them lose, or you gain a life. But their abilities to lose life, the lizards care about losing life. Are there any color pairs that are more intentionally, like more closely tied?
Yeah, one example of that, and we'll see this a little bit later on, is the Sultai color pairs, blue, black, and green, all care about the graveyard in some way. So we saw the squirrel mechanic earlier on was the keyword action forage, where you can exile cards from your graveyard to help pay for costs. On the flip side, rats care about threshold, right? So both those decks want to fill the graveyard. That would be an example. And we did put some effort into making sure that there was blending from one archetype to the next, because we didn't want them to be, totally siloed, like the mice are doing one thing and the birds are doing something completely different, because then sort of the draft would just divide up the cards among who's doing which archetype, and you're not competing for the same resources. So we wanted to make sure there was enough blending that you can kind of go your own path and mix
Persona
and match the
Outlaws.
creature types in different ways.
All right, well, let's actually talk about this.
Yeah, otters are going to be
next. So
crazy.
Black-green squirrels is our next archetype. We
Oh,
have
look at this fat
Berry
squirrel.
Cultivator, which is a heck of a card.
That got me there. Look at that beefy
beginning
boy.
of combat on your turn, you may forage, and whenever you forage, put a +1/+1 counter on it. Talk about this card.
Yeah, so this is telling you just what the squirrels are about doing, which is foraging here. So you can either fill your graveyard and exile cards from your graveyard, or create food and sacrifice food. And this card rewards you for any of your other cards foraging. So it gives you a way to forage, but also whenever any of your other cards ask you to forage, this will get bigger as well. So really kind of ties together all the different things that are going on with the squirrels. And as you're building,
Love
this
his-
deck, you can
his
either choose
gold
to
and
lean
black
into the food
leaf
theme of it,
armor is
or you can
gorgeous.
lean into the graveyard theme of it. and
Very
do more
cool.
Like a traditional black-green mid-range deck that's maybe recurring creatures from the graveyard and things along those
He gets
lines.
bigger as you forage. Yep.
And our next card that's sticking with the squirrel archetype is the secret unsung hero of this set, which is Puns. So here is Cash Grab.
Cash Grab.
Ian, tell us a little bit more about Cash Grab here.
Yeah, just a nice little smoothing utility spell to give you some card quality and help fill your graveyard, which you can then use to pay for forge cost and so on.
Now, I do want to stick with this because this set is pretty high in.
Look at him
puns.
shove
I know
nuts in his
you're
mouth.
Not in the group that names it, but was that kind of intentional? Did you all have a lot of fun with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just so tempting. when you're
Finally, the
talking
food
about
looks
adorable
tasty
little
again.
animals to get in as many
We had
cards
that
as you
gross
can,
food
and
for a
certainly
while that
Vision
looked all
Design
rotten.
team have off a bunch
The
of
Eldraine
cards
food
with,
looked all
at
rotten
the
and
time,
gross.
playtest names
Yeah.
that
I'm glad we have
named.
some
A
fresh
lot of those
cream and
changed
apple
over time,
tarts
but
and
in the
fruit
end,
and
the creative
oatmeal.
team did a great job
I like when the
of sort of
food looks
capturing that fun
delicious.
flavor.
The next one is not a pun, but let's look at Valley Rotcaller. So
Here we go. Look at this guy.
One thing I want to note here, and this was highlighted in the debut, is sort of the batching of creatures here. So can you talk
Batching.
a little bit about the squirrels, bats, lizards, and rats.
Yeah, so this is something we refer to as batched creature typal, meaning that we're combining
Oh, we
several
got
creature
batches
types
returning.
together. This is something we came up with during set design because we realized we wanted a strong emphasis on the creature types because these are lovable different types of animals that people are going to want to be able to build decks around. But a lot of these creature types are either appearing for the first time in Bloomburrow, or there just aren't very many cards, or there aren't very many strong cards throughout Magic's history that have these creature types. So we realized that if we wanted to care about the creature types in some way, we wanted to broaden things a little bit.
No, I'm much more
so that
hyped
we
now,
maybe
Vorpal.
combine a couple different
This
types
is
of
this is
animals
some good
together,
stuff
or
here.
play it with your choice of whichever is your favorite creature type within the set. So we have a cycle of rares here in the space of this Valley Rotcaller that are calling out 4 different creature types each, and the way that works is that those are the 4 creature types that appear in black. So the black-white bats, the black-blue squirrels, the black-green...
Mishra is a rat,
sorry,
confirmed.
black-blue
Well, we knew
rats,
that already,
black-green
Cookie.
squirrels, and black-red lizards.
We knew he was a
So
rat
those are the 4
bastard.
creature types that appear on the black example here.
Makes sense. And this card in particular looks pretty powerful for a 2-drop.
Yeah, I mean, Oliver can maybe speak more to that, but there's definitely packs a punch here.
Yeah, combination of menace and effectively unblockable drain damage definitely does a lot. Got to make sure to have 2 blockers for this one.
Yeah. All right. Next up, we'll stick with you, Oliver, and we'll talk about mice, which,
Mice Knights.
Probably, arguably the most adorable creature type in this set. They are also pretty aggressive, Oliver.
Yep. Mice are about Valiant, which is like a heroic-like mechanic or ability word, but has some key differences from heroic. It also triggers off abilities, so works with equipments and targeted activated abilities on other creatures, but it only works once per turn. So it's more about having a bunch of different Valiant creatures and then triggering all those in your turn, rather than the typical heroic gameplay, which is more about just having one heroic creature and then putting a bunch of pump effects onto that one creature.
Okay. And then, so what are the mice trying to do then when you're drafting them?
Yeah, I'd say you want to have a good combination of Valiant creatures, and
This is a little expensive, but it's a
equipment
common,
are
so
the
I
most
feel like this is
powerful
probably
way
a
to
decent
enable these,
draft
'cause
card.
You can just pay the equip cost for each of your Valiant creatures and trigger all of them in one turn. But also like combat tricks or like bite effects go a long way to enabling these.
All right. Well, let's go back to Ian, and we've already talked a little bit about raccoons, but let's say Sea Junkblade Bruiser, and talk more about raccoons.
Raccoons are in red and green, and they
Raccoons
are the
are
biggest
Gruul
of the
official.
main supported creature types in Bloomburrow. So we wanted to emphasize that they go a little bit bigger than some of the other creature types by using the expend mechanic that we talked about earlier on. So this is again when you spend your expend 4 is when you spend your 4th mana or more on casting spells in a turn. You get a big bonus here, and once again you can do that either by casting just one big spell that costs 4 or more mana, or dividing it up among a few other spells, and it leads to some pretty interesting strategic gameplay. For example, if I have this out already and I play a 2-drop creature before I attack, you might get a little suspicious. Does that mean I have a two cost instant spell in my hand that I'm going to cast during combat? So you can kind of set things up in that way, or even set up some interesting bluffs where you're sort of threatening the expend happening at instant speed. So pretty neat stuff there.
Now, I do want to call out here, the expend only works on spells, correct?
Correct.
Not abilities?
Yeah, we did at times during set design, we tried it out with working on activated abilities like
Rocket
Sacrifice of
Raccoon,
Food, for example. But it turned out it was a little bit too easy and a little bit too on board, right? Where you could trick your opponent with sort of like face
Trash
activations
Pandas on
and
that
a bunch
stomp
of
plan,
mana
hell yeah.
speed. So we ended up going with just the spell mechanic, and it plays a lot better.
All right. Oliver, let's move on to the green-white creature type, which is rabbits, which I know is going to be a
Here we go.
favorite of many. So here we've got Head of the Homestead. Look at that adorable little bunny crew there. When Head of the Homestead enters, you create 2 1/1 white rabbit creature tokens, which are going to be those adorable tokens on the right there. So Oliver, tell us about the
I think it's funny that she has
rabbits are naturally
1, 2,
about
3, 4,
going wide.
5,
Just wanna
6,
make a bunch of
7,
rabbit
8
tokens and
kids.
play like a
Little
mass
subtle
pump
nod.
effect to kill your opponent that way.
Little rabbit
And we saw
humor
a
here.
rare version of this in the debut, which is Phineas Ace Archer. So tell us a little bit about Phineas, Oliver.
Yeah, so Phineas is just one of those go wide payoffs. It obviously works with rabbits, but
So
more
he works
faster
with tokens as
compatibility. It
well.
also just works with tokens in general. So if you're building constructed decks,
That
you can
flexibility
just
really
build a
ups his
normal
power.
green-white token stack that doesn't necessarily have a lot of rabbits, and still use Phineas to good effect.
And that's a commonality among, we actually have a cycle of these legendary creatures at rare, 1 for each of the color pairs and hence creature types. And for many of them, we wanted to make them work really well mechanically with what the creature type was doing in the set, but be a little bit more generic, so it's not locked in. For example, Phineas isn't locked into just being a rabbit-only card. Like as Oliver said, it works with just any old token deck.
All right. We're sticking with rabbits for a second to stay on the pun train. Here's
Hop to it.
Oliver, how does Hop to it fit into the set besides being punny?
If this was
Yeah,
instant,
so it's just
it would be OP.
easy way to go wide with rabbits. Basically, just an army in a can. These kind of cards have had success in the past, and hopefully this one will do good work for your standard grab attack.
Yeah, bunny corn gonna go off.
Let's move back into frogs.
I want to see some
Ian?
birds. Azorius Flyers
so
looks
we
good.
got a pretty
Boo,
simple preview card here, Pond Prophet, which doesn't have the frog mechanic on it, but it's indicative of what frogs are trying to do, correct?
Yeah, frogs are, they're very much about enter the battlefield effects, and that's because the frog mechanics involve sort of blinking and bouncing your frogs from the battlefield into exile, then back onto the battlefield, or back to your hand so you can cast them again. So it's very much like a value-oriented deck where you're trying to reuse these enter the battlefield effects turn after turn. And so as the frog deck builds up its board, it sort of gets to a late game state where it's sort of a value engine type of a deck where you're drawing lots of cards and getting lots of value in terms of +1/+1 counters and other things like that by using your frogs multiple times.
All right. Someone just noted this in chat, and it's been out there for a little bit, but we haven't really talked about it officially. Can you talk a little bit about just enters? For the longest time, we've been using enters the battlefield. We've now shortened it to enters.
Yeah, this is
On
new
hopping
with
around the
Bloomburrow
board.
and
Oh
something
my
we're gonna be
goodness,
doing going
cookies.
forward with our templates. We are always thinking about our rules and templates and the words that go on our cards and trying to streamline that and make that a better experience.
60
for our
concurrent
players.
viewers. Thank you all for
So
watching.
we're
Thank you for
very
coming.
much,
If you're new
trying
here,
not to be stuck in
consider
the past, that,
subscribing,
enters the
like the video,
battlefield
all that good
were
stuff.
The old words that we were using for quite a long time, but we realized we can just shorten that.
We're getting this
take some
forest
words
animal
off the
hype up.
card, make it read more naturally, with natural English language, and just kind of simplify things going forward.
All right. Final archetype here, Oliver. Birds.
Rampant croak. Here we go, birds. I'm
White
interested in this.
birds. We have
Believe it or
seed
not,
spot-
I'm
seed
interested in this.
Pod Squire here. Say that 5 times fast. And when it attacks target creature you control without flying, gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Oliver, that's a pretty unique line right there.
Yeah, birds are definitely pretty weird because all the birds have flying, but they want to work with non-flyers. This is largely a concession to limited just because having like 2 between birds and bats of archetypes where all your creatures have flying just leads to pretty boring gameplay where you can't really block any of your opponent's creatures. So birds are more about combining the birds with creatures from the other archetypes to enable the non-flying thresholds.
All right.
And that's also reflective of some of the creative elements of Bloomburrow, where the birds are just sort of like helpful creatures that are kind of around helping everybody else out. So it makes sense both from a mechanical standpoint and a flavor standpoint. And one of my secret favorite archetypes to draft is birds plus mice, because a lot of the birds have ways of triggering the Valiant ability. For example, giving another mouse flying, which then makes it evasive, but also triggers its Valiant.
Oh, yeah. That makes sense.
Battle burbs.
And then our next bird card is because I get to pick these, and it's a pun. So it's Strike Force.
Shrike Force, because it's a shrike.
This is,
You
flying,
get it, guys.
Double strike, vigilance.
You
what
get
are we
the
doing
pun.
with this card in Limited, Oliver?
It's a strong standalone card. I also like it in the mouse decks because you're going to have combat tricks, so you could pump this up for a lot of damage.
Now, how, I mean, obviously you're designing white cards that are white and blue cards that are blue.
One
but
more like to 40
overall,
likes, guys. Let's get it there.
You mentioned they're putting this in mice decks. How much did you pay attention to colors versus hybrid versus gold cards to make sure that they fit in different archetypes in different ways?
It was definitely something we thought a lot about. We wanted to make sure that the set, as I said earlier, wasn't too siloed and that things blended together a little bit. So in choosing, whether a card was monocolor or hybrid or gold, like a lot of it is how easy it is to cast and how many decks can it go in. So largely we tried to aim the
Skibbity
gold cards
cat.
at being very directional and teaching you what the archetypes are about. The monocolor cards being sort of a little bit more flexible than that, where they go in the archetypes, but they might be generically useful enough that they can go in a neighboring archetype instead. And then the hybrid ones we tried to make sort of like a little bit instructional as to what that color pair is doing,
Nice.
but also
Okay, so this is
generically
just
useful
all of
so
them
you
that
can
we saw.
slot into other
Very,
decks,
very
if you
flexible
sort of
mana,
can reach
especially
for a
at
hybrid
Pauper.
card that was sort of meant for another deck but can slot into yours.
All right. And then here you can see all 10 of the common hybrid cards. Are there other hybrid cards in the set? Are these the only ones?
No, I believe these are the only ones. Yeah, just the 10 commons.
Okay. Before we leave mechanics, we're going to go on to Calamity Beast next, but there
Here we
was
go.
a
This is what I wanna
question
see.
I wanted to grab from chat, which was about the expend mechanic, and the question was, can you trigger or meet the requirements for expend on your opponent's turn as well?
You can on your opponent's turn as well. It's obviously a little bit harder, to spend a lot of mana on your opponent's turn, but you can do it. And one other rules thing that comes up often with expend is that you can only meet the certain expend threshold once per turn, regardless of sort of how you divided it up or what order things come into play. It's looking at the whole turn from start to finish, how much mana you've spent up until that point.
Okay. And again, if you want to dive deep into the mechanics, there will be a mechanics article that will go up on dailymtg.com at the conclusion of this stream. All right, Ian, we're going to go back to you to talk about Calamity Beasts. So we saw some in the debut, but let's go over it again. What are Calamity Beasts?
So we've seen lots of small, little, adorable animals, but as with any Magic set, we want to make sure that we have variety in the cards that we're showing you here. So we have some big, powerful, heavy hitters as well. These are the Calamity Beasts here, and from a creative standpoint,
Calamity
they sort of
Ganon
represent like walking natural disasters. You know, like the giant blackbird shows up and brings nightfall with it, or the giant fish swims up, the leviathan fish swims up and brings a tidal wave with it, that sort of thing. So we tried to give them sort of big, destructive powers to contrast the mostly like helpful and community-oriented smaller animals that are part of the 10 main archetypes.
Okay. Well, let's take a look at our preview of a Calamity Beast here. We've got Beza the Bounding Spring. I am going to read this one because there is a lot going on.
There we go. There's a big boy.
4/5 elemental elk. When it
boy.
enters, create a treasure token, and if an opponent controls more lands than you, you gain 4 life, and an opponent has
It's
more life
whatever,
than
man.
you
Let
get
their
2
furry
1/1
flag fly,
blue
man.
Fish creature tokens. If an
I like to
opponent
see
has
what the
more
creative
lands than you,
interpretation is.
And you draw a card if an opponent has more cards than you. So, Ian, what's going on with this?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier that most of the Calamity Beasts are destructive, but this is sort of an exception to that rule, being the mono white one of this particular cycle. And this is bringing with it, sort of bringing springtime with it, and bringing lots of sort of bounty and benefits reminiscent of cards we've seen in the past, like Timely Reinforcements. And this is interesting white color pie space where it's saying, like, if your opponent is outpacing you and they're ahead of you in a certain aspect of the game, that you're catching up a little bit with this ability here.
Very cool. Now we saw one, Oliver, I'm going to go to you for this next one. We saw one in the debut article. That was on the destructive side. So we've got Maad's Feathers Knight here.
This is the this the dude right here.
Line with creatures your
Maha,
opponents
my
control
dude.
have base toughness 1.
Yeah, a lot of interesting things you could do with this card. Combine it with like engineered plague type of cards in Commander, and give your opponents a bad time that way. And it's just a solid, hard to kill body by itself. So it does a lot of damage. And
No
also
sharks.
enables a lot of attacks.
Snow's gonna be
Like,
disappointed.
even if your
She loves
opponent has
sharks.
a 6/6 blocker in play, you could start attacking with your 1/1s and whatnot.
Yeah. And I don't recall, Ian, have we talked about borderless field notes yet? If not, let's cover again where borderless field notes are.
So nobody's
Yeah,
talking about
these
this. If you have
are
a Stompy, like a
specifically to the
Gruul
Calamity Beast.
Stompy,
There's 8 cards in this
and you're
set.
getting
Some of them pick
trample,
one rare, they're
all their
Calamity
base
Beasts.
toughness is
And they
1.
can
You
appear
drop
to
this
appear both
immediately
foil
and then
and
hit with a
non-foil,
ton of
and you
tramples.
select your boost
They're going to have
and
no
boost.
effective blockers.
Very cool.
You could put 15 damage
Next
down on
up,
the board
Oliver,
just
we're gonna
because
run through- we've seen a couple
their toughness
of
ain't
these,
not able to stop
The
anything.
next 5 cards are a series of uncommons that you can get in promo packs through your local game store. So we've seen Hop to It, Shoreline Looter,
Oh my goodness,
Wear
Fell.
Down, and Stormcatch Mentor. And then
Destroy
we've got
target creature for a
Fell
2-drop
in the
as a
middle
sorcery.
there,
Not
which,
instant speed, but sorcery.
destroy target creature
Very
for 2
powerful.
Mana, Oliver. That's a new line attack.
Yep, just very exciting catch-all removal spell. I just like how clean it is, but it has to be a sorcery, whereas a lot of these variants of these cards are instants, so that's the compensation for just being able to destroy anything.
Yeah. I also have to call out that art there. We used that art pretty early on the set, but it's
Great
that's
art.
some
Look at
pretty
that
fantastic
owl.
art on Fell right there.
Gorgeous art right there.
Yeah, all these cards are not the most splashy cards, but they're
With
very
the
strong
falling
workhorse
moons
cards
and
that
the stars in
will
its
probably
wings.
make a
Awesome.
impact
That
on a
might be a
variety of
phone
archetypes,
wallpaper right
even
there.
outside of just the Bloomburrow types.
So I did notice, you've got a white
I'm
card,
thinking
blue card,
Maha
black
with
card,
Massacre
green card,
Girl.
a gold card. Do you guys know how you ended up on that instead of grabbing a red card?
I think we were just mostly looking for just appealing cards and sort of the broader aspect of Magic, where even if you're not like super zeroed in on Bloomburrow specifically, that these are useful cards to you. So.
All right, cool. Okay, next up, we are going to talk about one of the most fun and exciting aspects of the set, which is the Imagine Courageous Critters. So these are cards that are reimagined as if they went into Bloomburrow. because if you don't know, Bloomburrow has as the plane has this.
Okay,
effect
here
where
we
you
go.
come in,
Here's the
you
first
become
zone.
some kind of
Here's the
animal.
persona part of the stream, guys.
Now, some of the courageous critters were already animals, but they get Bloomburrowized a little bit, which is really fun. So first, before we talk about these, Ian, tell us a little bit about where you can find courageous critters and what their legality is, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so this treatment, as you said, they're reimagined pre-existing Magic cards, so they're not going to be made standard legal by appearing in.
Okay, so they're not standard legal. Very important point.
Legal in whatever formats they're already legal, but these are cool new versions of them. And they're available in both foil and non-foil, but these ones are only available in collector boosters specifically.
Okay. The one exception to that is that
Canonical
Growl is not in the Magic
personas.
Courageous critter. It's in the main set, correct?
That's right, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And as you'll see with our first preview card, they are not all planeswalkers. So the first one, I've already seen chat calling
Oh,
this
well, here we
card
go.
forth with several of the squirrel cards.
Yeah,
But
Chatterfang.
This is Chatterfang Squirrel General. We've got that Imagine Courageous Critters in the middle there, and then it has a borderless raised anime card. And as you can see, it's going to be in a commander deck as well.
Chatterfang reprint, kind of
Alright,
big.
And then now we've got a pair of reimagined planeswalkers. This one, I love this art. That's all I'm going to say. When we see Nissa, who shakes the world.
Nissa is a
as
frog.
Yeah, do you know how the creator
Here we go.
team
We got
picks,
it.
what
We got
animal?
it, chat.
I couldn't tell you off the top
We're
of my
going
head.
to have to get some people.
Cultural
Yeah.
victory.
Love to find some of the stories, though.
Yeah. That's a good plug. Next week we are going to talk about that. So next week we're actually going to reveal the slate of courageous critters beyond what is revealed today, and we're going to talk about a lot of the art choices and concepting for those. But first, Nissa, who shakes the world as a frog. And then we have Liliana of the Dark Realms as a squirrel.
Oh my goodness.
Evil-looking squirrel.
That's really
Not the
cool. I love
squirrel
colors.
thighs. Not the squirrel thighs,
Okay,
guys.
Yeah, so there are, again, there are two types of the courageous critters. There are the ones that are found in the commander. There are ones that are found in the collector boosters.
They
and then there
had
are
to
four that
commission
are found in the
furry artists for this. What are we talking about here?
That's right, yeah. 4 exclusives to the
What are we talking
We
about?
saw the Tamio in the debut video.
They had to
We'll
have.
see the rest as we look at the commander decks. Finally, we saw these in
Oh,
the
yeah.
debut as well, but I want to talk about.
Oh,
one of the
it's
more
gonna hit Twitter like
delightful
crack in the
things
80s.
in packs, which are the seasonal basics. Ian, what's the story with the basics here?
So these are super sweet, sort of borderless, full art basic lands that are available in both foil.
Somebody
and
having an
non-foil,
aneurysm right
collector
now.
Boosters and play boosters.
They just
And
saw
what's really
Goth
cool
Squirrel
about
Mommy
these
and
is,
their
each
life
one,
has
Each
changed.
of the basic lands has 4 different seasons that it's available in, so you can collect all of those or choose your favorite one. And it's worth noting that the different seasons appear at different frequencies. So I don't have the exact numbers on that, but I believe spring and summer are a little bit more common than, for example, the winter ones.
Yeah, which makes sense because that's their seasons of plenty. It makes sense. It's also in the collecting article where you can see the exact breakdown of how often you'll find spring, summer, autumn, and
Furry planeswalker. I hope, man. I hope we need more porn art of Magic. We need more, not porn, but Rule
All right,
34
and
art.
then
Lewd
finally, before we get to, we have a little bit of time for questions. So we've got
All right,
a
let's see if
couple
we can
more
ask
preview cards,
questions.
and then we'll dive into some Q&A. And so let's look at just a couple adorable little preview cards. So this is a reprint.
Aw, an otter and a frog running
But
away
that
together.
art, the flavor text, it's adorable. Run Away Together is always a really cute card whenever we reprint it, and this is no exception. Nobody bothered to look for Lebo and Pulla because everybody knew they didn't want to be found. That's some sweet art there. All right, flipping the script, but again, this is just art I like, I guess, is the category we're in. Ruthless Negotiation. Now, Ian, I will call out that we haven't
Nice.
seen a ton of flashback in this set, and this card has flashback.
We
all
have
the time.
flashback.
Yeah, that's because there isn't a ton of flashback in the set. There's actually just 1 black uncommon and 1 blue uncommon, I believe, unless I'm forgetting maybe a rare or 2. But it was just a little light addition.
Exile,
there.
instant
We
exile
decided
card
that
from your hand,
flashback
and then
is
you can
something
recast
that
it on turn
is sort of
5.
deciduous,
Not
that can
bad.
appear,
Not
from
bad
time
for
to
a
time in
discard
sets
deck.
without being a major mechanic, and it just made sense to have a couple flashback cards here, given the graveyard themes.
Is that an otter
the
threatening a
rats and
raccoon?
squirrels. So you just see a little.
This
bit
set
of
is
that.
weird, man. I love it.
Yeah, and again, with some fantastic art here. And then finally, Repel Calamity is some art we used really early on, and we figured we might as well show what the card
This is just a
actually
worse
does here.
Destroy Evil.
We've seen
Oh, power or
in
toughness?
A lot of variations
Oh,
of this
I didn't even
destroy
notice
creature
that. Okay, so it's a slightly
sort of
different.
thing. So how did we land it? Repel
That's a weasel.
Calamity.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry,
Just,
Cookies.
yeah,
It's a
sort of the
weasel.
next in
I
line of
apologize.
A variant here. We
Mea
just want to make
culpa.
sure that there was a little bit more removal available, especially for the large Calamity beasts that appear at higher rarity. Especially now that we're moving into the new play booster world, where there's more rares appearing in the drafts and stuff. We just want to make sure there's just a little bit more availability of answers.
Makes sense. And also fantastic art. And I honestly swear to you, did not put together Repel Calamity and the fact that this kills Calamity Beasts together until just this moment. So good job, naming team. Finally, we do have the set symbols here, just to put them out there because this shows you what. So we got Bloomburrow, the main set. We've got the commander in the middle, and special guests. That is the same special guests symbol that we use for all of the special guests. All right, we do have time for some questions. So if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in chat. It helps for me if you tag @Magic, and we will ask Ian and Oliver about these. So let's start with.
All right, what question should we ask?
Tell me there is a bat Sorin. You can't actually
I
tell
can't
them
yet,
that.
but we may find out down the road.
Let's see. All right. First, just the art is amazing, and then will there be support for 3 colors in limited? Since you probably want to mix and match.
Look at how fast this chat is going.
Yeah, so we definitely made sure there's ample mana fixing in limited, and certainly throughout playtesting, people did definitely splash or play 3 colors. For example, I mentioned earlier that like rats and squirrels play well together.
Yep.
If you want to build a Sultai deck, these aren't the primary strategies. I wouldn't imagine that you've got 4 people at a draft table doing 3+ colors or anything like that. But if you want to, you certainly can, and we definitely put the tools in the set to be able to do that.
All right. Will all 14 cards in play boosters be from the Bloomburrow main set and standard playable?
Yeah, I believe that's correct. I'd have to double check on that. Let me not commit to an answer on that yet. We might have some more information for you.
I believe you can get some non-one. Yeah, but let's not commit to that right now.
Yeah.
All right. With the paw prints, so the seasons, do you get the paws to spend just from casting the modal spell, or it is a separate resource you can get?
Bat Liliana.
Place?
We only
we touched on that
have.
earlier,
She's an
but
evil
yeah,
squirrel
to clarify
Liliana.
that, again,
That's what
those
we
spells
had.
are totally self-contained. So when every time you cast a spell, you get sort of 5 points worth to spend on the modes. There's no external way of getting additional points, before you cast the spell.
She is now
And
canonically an
you
evil
cast the
squirrel.
spell. It's just totally
I don't make the rules. This is what they
Can I
did.
break a promise when I gift? I'm not really a gift-giving kind of person.
It's a good question, good question. So the way gift works, and again, we'll have a whole rules FAQ and stuff like that, but basically, as you cast the spell, you're making the decision of whether to promise the gift to your opponent or not.
Yep.
And then when the spell resolves, they receive the gift as the spell is resolving. So if somebody counterspells the spell or it fizzles for whatever reason, your opponent won't get the gift if you're not also getting the spell effect.
All right. This is the most important question. Blake, what would you be if you went to Bloomburrow? And we'll all answer this. I have my answer ready because our team actually talked about this yesterday.
Okay.
I would be either an otter or a rat. Probably.
All right, so here's the Fursona
I
section.
leaned otter, but I have to.
He leans otter.
Sometimes I'd probably be a rat. Ian.
Good question. I think I'd probably be a bird of some sort.
That would be
because I
really
like
good,
helping
Orman.
Other people out and being generally useful to the communities around me. Probably an owl, maybe, just because
Okay.
sometimes I kind of like to
Little curveball.
stay a little
outside
bit
the-
aloof
all right.
and kind of
right.
playing into the wise elder kind of aspect or whatever.
Yep. Oliver.
I would definitely be an otter. I just like casting spells.
This
and
guy would definitely be an otter. He's thought about it. He thought about it way before.
It does. It really does.
He's already got that. He's got the plans for the suit.
All right. Was there any intentionality to create cards with text boxes with fewer words or simpler mechanics? You talked a little bit about that with enters.
Yeah, it's always something that we're thinking about. There's always a careful balance between making cards that are, simpler and more accessible and have fewer words on them versus making things that are exciting and are going to
Otter in real life here.
Magic that have been playing for 5, 8, 10 years, right? So it's always a little bit of a push and pull there, and it's always sort of a value calculation of like, are these extra words worth it versus can we trim some words and still get 95% of the functionality that we want out of this card.
All right. Is the dragon bird from a different plane than Bloomburrow? It seems odd. We don't have any other dragons.
Yeah, I don't want to necessarily spoil anything. I think there might be some more information, but it's a great question, and you're definitely catching on to the right things.
Yep, we saw a lot of. I will call out to all of them. So there are 5 episodes to either read or listen to right now. Let's see. Are we getting more sable and or ferret creatures in Bloomburrow? We did see that there are some kind of one-ofs.
What did he answer your question? What would your persona be?
Sable or ferret?
I don't want to speak to either of those specifically, just because I don't recall exactly where a bunch of the sort of one-off creatures landed with their final creature types
nice.
and art treatments and things
I think
that.
probably a lot of people ask that, but it's hilarious that
creatures. We called them cameo creatures.
Now you know. Don't ask unless you want to know. You found out. You peered into the abyss, and the abyss gazed back. Cookies.
And just to kind of convey the variety of the plane in general.
Cool. I saw a question about when we're going to show off the special guest cards. That's going to be next week's show. We're going to talk about.
They had to answer it.
And we're going to talk about courageous critters, basically things that have some really cool art treatments.
He read out your message word for word, which I freeze playing with Blake specifically. Oh my god. Okay, so yeah, he specifically answered your question. Great question. I would be an otter, Cookies.
Let's see. Is the list back with Bloomburrow? So that's no.
Tamio, they just have a.
Yes and no.
Yeah.
I would be a bear.
Back to the earlier question of, like,
I feel
are
like
all
that's
the cards
acceptable.
from the main set, and I believe you're
I'm
right.
pretty hungry and sleepy a
Special
lot.
guests can show up,
And I'm pretty
and
big.
They are the ones that are a little.
I know what you mean, though, Cookies.
Will
we get a board?
Tamio's not alive again. They made a rabbit version of Tamio.
Yeah,
they made an art version.
We saw a very
Tamio
good one
persona,
earlier, right,
basically.
in
The season of loss can be
Season
a
of
kind
Loss.
of board wipe.
Yeah.
Does Offspring always cost 2?
No, it's not necessarily always 2. The ones we saw were, but there are a variety of costs for Offspring.
Yep. Is Offspring multi-kicker? So this is a good clarification. Can you pay it once, twice?
They did clerics. They haven't done any angels yet. I don't know if we're gonna get a.
All right.
I don't know if we're gonna get
Are
an
there
angel.
going to be a lot of food-making spells?
Yeah, there's definitely a good amount of food in the set. It's both a great flavor fit in terms of the pastoral environment, and then also plays into the squirrel mechanic specifically. One thing we try to do is give you other things to
Definitely
do.
clerics.
rather than
Bats
just
are
that
clerics. We
creating
got
life.
Orzhov clerics probably gonna be pretty
trying to
powerful.
Inflate life totals and make limited games go longer. So you'll see lots of things to do with food in addition to the food itself.
Okay. Oliver, I think this is a good question for you. How do you balance the power of the set with the fact that most of the creatures are small?
Yeah. Yeah. So for limited, the raccoons tend to be on the bigger side, so it helps like give them a clear identity. And then
Hyena.
for constructed, it's actually kind of nice.
We might get
because,
some hyenas
cheaper
in
cards tend to be stronger and constructed. So
in the
it's
con
easy to
set.
make a
I
lot
feel
of,
like
the
that's
rares and
wilderness enough to have
exciting legendary
scavengers.
cards in the set.
I don't know. Hyenas are
Better shot and constructed.
Did you ever consider
underrepresented in
heroic
Magic.
instead of Valiant?
We didn't specifically consider heroic. The Vision Design team did hand off Valiant more or less where it is right now. We did try a couple different variants of Valiant in terms of like, being able to trigger multiple times per turn or what things did and didn't trigger it before settling on the final version. Heroic specifically, I will say, having worked on sets like Theros in the past, requires a lot of set infrastructure around it. And here we knew we wanted Valiant to just be a mouse mechanic, which is really like a 1/10 slice of the set, right? Because it's just one of the 10 color pairs. So we knew we wanted something that was a little bit easier to do and sort of a tighter floor and ceiling between the not triggering it and triggering it as compared to heroic. So that's kind of where we landed on Valiant as a heroic variant.
Cool. I did see a question about whether you can open commander cards in play boosters, asking for draft. I believe the answer for this set
Knowles,
is no.
yeah, we had some. The only time I see on
Looking at the
Knoll that was any
breakdown, and
worth
again,
it was
after
in the
show,
Dungeons and Dragons
You
set.
can head to dailymtg.com and the full collecting article.
There's an
will be up.
angel.
But just looking at the
Oh,
breakdown
angel
of play
swan.
boosters,
Okay.
it says that each play booster will contain 6 to 7 commons. Some of those play boosters will contain a card from the list, which is what we're talking about instead of a
Oh, it's a
common.
cleric.
And then
Salvation Swan.
the list says cards found on the list in Bloomburrow are special guest cards. So that's the only slot where you can get sort of non-main set cards out of. Oh, actually, I say that. There's a wild card slot. Read the article. It's. I don't want to speak 100% to that because there might be. Yeah, we'll get that answer afterwards. Let's see. With the magic cards, so I think this is referring to the tokens having converted mana cost. Does this mean other cards like Roxanne's Meteorite token now has a 5 mana value? So this isn't a rule change, right? This is just how the Offspring mechanic
Correct.
works?
Yeah. In order to make Offspring as simple as possible, just being able to say, hey, it's a copy of the creature except it's 1/1 is the simplest way we can convey that. But in doing so, the rules then say that it's also inheriting the mana cost. So we want to make sure that that mana cost was reflected on the token, but in a way that didn't trick you into thinking the token was its own individual mana.
Yeah, angels are going to be in a
individual
bad
magic
spot
card
for a
that you can
while.
put in your deck. So that's why it says down in the text box of the token, sort of in reminder text, that it has the mana cost.
That makes sense. Let's see. I'm seeing a number of good questions. Any arena questions? Head to the arena blog after this. There will be an arena article going up that will cover at least some of these questions. I'm trying to get through this quickly because we are almost out of time. I am seeing questions about whether Phyrexians missed Bloomburrow during the invasion. I don't think you guys know. That's not your area of
That
expertise.
might be a question for next week when the art. and
Yeah,
creative
we'll
folks are on.
talk about that a little bit later. So here is going to be our final question because I know you can answer this one. How many Calamity Beasts are there? And then what sort of color identities do we get for the Calamity Beasts?
Ooh, that's tough. You're really testing my memory.
I
on a
am.
set-
How
set that
many I think you
finalized.
can do?
So how many total Calamity Beasts?
Duskmourn
I
might see
wanna
some
say
angels.
there's
We're definitely
around
getting demons.
Total.
Okay.
Yeah, between like 8 and 10.
Okay.
plus
Me and
minus.
Numbskulls are
Sorry,
going to have
what's the
our,
second part of the
our
question?
work cut out
color
for us here.
Color identities. So we do have a cycle of mythic monocolor Calamity Beasts,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's sort of just a smattering of them in different color combinations at rare,
Okay.
including the one multicolor one that we saw earlier. Yeah.
The one
so,
that turns
so
everything
they're,
into
they're
food,
not
yeah.
hard cycled in a way, which is part of why it's a little bit tough to tell you exactly how many are in the set off the top of my head.
Yeah.
But it's basically a cycle of 5 mythics plus a smattering of rare ones.
All right. Great. Well, that is all the time we
Here
have.
we
That's
go,
our
we're
hour,
ending.
But Bloomburrow is going to march on. Previews are going to continue throughout the internet. Today, tomorrow, into next week.
They've never let me preview a card.
On Weekly MTG next week, and again, we're going to be talking art. We are specifically going to
Still haven't. I see
special
smaller
guest
creators
cards
previewing
and
cards, so
the,
I don't know if they have
creators
something against me or something. I don't know what it is.
To talk about concepting those and doing a lot of fun stuff.
I feel like they
with
just don't know
that
about me or they
art.
don't like me
So,
personally. I don't
head
know.
to dailymtg.com
I've never done anything
after
that
this for
against
all of the
Wizards. I've
details
never
on all of the things,
shit-talked them really yet.
including a list of where to find previews on what days and what websites or social media accounts or wherever it may be. Until then, thank you, Ian. Thank you, Oliver, and we will see you next week.
All right, guys, that's it. New video at, maybe we'll put up the new video at 3 or 4 o'clock. We'll wait and see. Thank you all for coming. We're going to end it right there. Great stream. Thank you for coming. Thank you for joining. Bloomburrow, a little bit more hype for Bloomburrow. We combine this with the ability that we're getting. Talk about how broken with all the control. Listen, man, every streamer talks about that. I mean, we gotta acknowledge the elephant in the room. Thank you so much for coming. We'll be back with more stuff. A little bit more hype for Bloomburrow. Looks more fun. And definitely hype for rotation. So until next time, guys, I've been Jay Villain. You've been great. Thank you for coming by. we are out of here. Bye-bye.